past hour, we've heard from President Donald Trump. He's been very vocal about monetary policy. He's been very vocal about Jerome Powell as well. This during an interview with Fox Business. He hit on tariffs, trade, and doubled down on his attack on Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Let's take a listen.
Here's a guy, nobody ever heard of him before, and now I made him, and he wants to show how tough he is. Okay, let him show how tough he is. He's not doing a good job. Look, I have the right to demote him. I have the right to fire him.
All right, Christine Romans joins me now. It's pretty jaw-dropping stuff. I mean, we had Jerome Powell yesterday saying we're independent, no one can intervene, and now you've got President Trump saying, listen, I can demote, I can fire.
And he said, the President of the United States said, Jerome Powell, I made him. Let him try to show how tough he is. I made him. The point of the Fed that appears to escape the President of the United States is that it is independent. It is appointed by the President, but then there are these terms that are long meant to withstand, you know, the ebb and flow of politics, because every president would like low interest rates heading into an election year. If you did that, you'd have boom and crash and burn economies one after the other. So it's sort of like the Supreme Court. It's not a co-equal branch of government, but it's sort of designed like the Supreme Court to be something that sits aside, outside of the White House. And this president very publicly is trying to send this signal that he wants lower rates. He said he wants Mario Draghi to be the Fed chief because in Europe they are talking about stimulus and cutting rates and injecting stimulus into the economy, and the president was waxing poetic about that. And Eleni, he has talked about President Xi Jinping before, and he has sort of lamented that the United States isn't like China, communist China. He has lamented that the United States is not like China, so the president can just devalue a currency or inject stimulus whenever he wants for whatever reason.
I mean, the Mario Draghi comment really just, threw me off, because Europe is dealing with a whole set of other issues. They need to stimulate to grow the economy. The U.S. is growing. I mean, the holy grail of an economy is basically the way the central banks conduct themselves. And of course, monetary policy is part of that. We've perhaps, learned the lessons of, overstimulation in the past, and that led to an overheated economy and a financial crisis. I mean, surely they should be looking at this as well, because it's a big risk.
Here's what's so amazing, and I've even pulled this up for you. This president, when he was Citizen Trump, and the Fed was lowering interest rates during a financial crisis, during the Barack Obama administration, this president was criticizing the Fed for lowering interest rates, criticizing the Fed for easy money policies that would lead to too much trouble or an inflated stock market down the road. So this president today is demanding from the Fed chief what he has criticized Janet Yellen and the Obama administration in a much, much weaker economy for doing. So he's on the record saying that easy money policies are dangerous. He has likened, she's obviously political, he says, and she's doing what Obama wants her to do, talking about Janet Yellen. That's why it's low rates, because as soon as they go up, your stock market is going to go way down. I believe it's a false market. That's what he is asking for here.
Exactly. Very different to what we heard from Jerome Powell yesterday, that they're being reticent, they're going to be proactive if needed. But also, what else did President Trump say? He was talking about so many things, from trade to monetary policy. I mean, he even said Vietnam is even worse than China, and everyone was talking about how Vietnam is going to be the next big play.
I have to tell you that these interviews with the president, he's been speaking, he just wrapped up, actually, so he's been speaking for more than an hour. And when he did this on CNBC maybe last week, and it's like, the pinball game where you pull back the trigger and the ball goes all around. That's what the thought process is here on trade. And in that pinball conversation, what I heard him slamming the Europeans, threatening potentially the idea of big tariffs on the Europeans down the road. That could be a headline I think we should watch for down here. Slamming Vietnam, saying it's much smaller than China, but that they were looking at tariffs in Vietnam. Slamming the Canadians, but saying they've more recently come to the table. He talks as though he's aggrieved that the United States is someone who's been just kicked on the beach in the sand, that's face in the sand for years and years. He talks about China taking $500 billion a year from us, only looking at the one side of that trade relationship. Of course, American consumers received $500 billion worth of goods in exchange for that $500 billion that crossed, and also the benefit of so many multinational corporations of their supply chains. So the president has a very simplistic view of things, and he ties a thread between sometimes unrelated items to really push what I think a lot of business leaders realize this is the way the president thinks, so they have to kind of adjust around that because he's not changing his mind.